In a Common tab, change the render output size to 500 by 299 pixels. Also, make sure the image aspect is locked. Let's check the other rendering settings and do a quick test render. Since there are no lights in the scene and the sunlight needs to shine through the windows, we are going to focus on the windows. The entire set of windows are currently groups. Select the window group and choose to open it from the toolbar. Select the group window and isolate it. Make sure you have all 4 viewports in display. This window was created by simply clicking on a standard primitives rollout and choosing Windows from the list. In the window subject type, click on the sliding button. In the top viewport, click and drag to the right to set the width first, and drag forward to set the depth like so. Open the Modify panel and begin tweaking the window parameters. There's currently a chamfer modifier added to bevel the sharp edges. Before we start applying materials, we need to establish the default material IDs of the glass and other parts of the window. To do this, let's add the Editable Poly modifier first. In the selection group, enable the polygon selection and select the glass area in the viewport. Back in the modifier, you can see the polygon material ID set to 3 by default. You can set this material ID to a different number if you wish. Let's go back to the material editor and create a new material slot for the window. Select a new material slot and click on the standard toggle. In the material browser dialog, select the V-Ray material as previously done. Next, we're going to click on the V-Ray material toggle and choose the multi-subobject procedural map from the standard list. Choose the option to keep old material as submaterial. The next step is to copy the V-Ray material toggle from material ID 1 to material ID 3, which is the glass. Let's go inside the toggle and make this material transparent. In the refract group, click on its color swatch and make the whiteness value very bright. The brighter the whiteness value, the more transparent the material will be. Enable the background button to preview the transparency more accurately, and double-click on the material slot to scale the preview thumbnail. More transparency and less transparency. You can control the index of refraction with these values. 1.6 is often the refraction value of a light bulb. The window glass value is often set to 1.1 or 1.2. Because this is a transparent material, we need the Effect Channels function to remain to all channels and the Effect Shadows option enabled. This will allow shadows to cast through the transparency and these properties to be picked up in render elements such as V-Ray Light Select and Multimatte. Next, we're going to check the window frame material ID while the Editable Poly is still enabled. As you can see, the window frame material ID is currently set to 4. Back in the material editor, let's continue tweaking the glass material. As previously done, for better control of the settings, let's uncheck the Fresnel option. Also, unlock the Highlight Glossiness button. Bring up the material slot preview again and begin reducing the highlight glossiness. Open the Reflect Color Swatch dialog and increase the reflectivity slightly. Let's go back to the main multi-subobject material and name the material ID 3 as glass. Next, we're going to work on a window frame material. Let's start by copying the V-Ray material ID 1 to material ID 4 and name it as metal. Inside the metal material, let's change the BRDF type to wood. This is the ideal type of metal finish we are trying to achieve. Next, we're going to increase the reflectivity slightly. Uncheck the Fresnel and unlock the highlight glossiness. We can also brighten up the diffuse color a bit. So for the highlight and glossiness value, we're going to decrease it to about 0.69. To control how spread out the reflections are going to be, let's reduce the reflect value to about 0.88. In the reflection values, let's set it to about 70. Most surfaces in real life have a fall-off that transcends from a base color to a darker one. To emulate this effect, we're going to use a fall-off procedural map. Click on the V-Ray material toggle and choose the fall-off procedural map from the standard list. Let's change the darker color value to about 7 and change the brighter color value to about 27. Normally, the brighter color shouldn't be way much brighter than the base darker color. As mentioned earlier, it's simply to have that fall-off effect. Let's go back to the main multi-subobject parameters and assign it to the window. Let's open the modifier panel and enable the polygon selection, followed by selecting other parts of the window to see the material ID number. Now we can see that's material ID number 1. Copy the V-Ray material ID 4 to material ID 1 and choose to instance it. If you want to find out where the material ID 2 is, simply go to Select ID and type in number 2 and click Select. It's now selected. Now you can go to the multi-subobject, copy and paste instance as previously done, close the modify panel and exit the isolation mode. The next step is to create the sunlight. Make sure you have all 4 viewports in display first. Click on the Lights button, choose V-Ray from the list, followed by clicking on the V-Ray Sun button. In the top viewport, click and drag the target to create the V-Ray Sun. A dialog asking you to add the V-Ray Sun in environment should come up. Click Yes to close it. The following step is to add V-Ray exposure control to the environment. Open the Environment and Effects dialog by clicking 8 on your keyboard. There, you can see the V-Ray sky previously added to the environment map. Add the V-Ray exposure by clicking on Exposure Control Rollout and choosing V-Ray Exposure Control from the list. Let's set the ISO value to about 200 to make the overall exposure a bit darker. Before we do another test render, let's lock the camera viewport first. This means that even when another viewport is selected, camera 1 will be the one to be rendered. When rendering, always make sure to have the display color in sRGB space enabled, especially when working on daylight scenes. The next step is to position the sunlight in a way that you will cast shadows through the windows, affecting the wooden floor and the sofa. This will make the overall scene a lot more appealing. Right-click to choose the Move tool and begin moving the sunlight. Also, enable the Lights Only selection filter. This will prevent you from selecting objects in the scene accidentally. It's good practice to always have the 4 viewports in display when positioning the sunlight. That green spline in the middle is a good indication of where the direct light is being cast. Let's do another test render. You can also use the Track Mouse while rendering tool by enabling its button. Let's reposition the sunlight a bit further. While the sunlight is still selected, open the modifier panel and increase the photon radius to encapsulate more of the living room area. And let's do another test render. We can now see the direct light being cast on the floor and other surfaces. However, Some of the areas affected by the sun seem a bit too bright. Let's reduce the sun intensity multiplier to about 0.3 and do another test render. The sun intensity is now looking much better. The following step is to continue applying the textures. Let's start with the sofa on the far left. To start, let's change the selection filter from lights to all. Select the sofa on the far left and isolate it. When it comes to seamless high resolution textures, I often go to cgtextures.com. Simply Google CG Textures to find it. Here you can find all types of high resolution textures and they're all seamless. So you don't need to spend time in post trying to make them seamless. To find the specific textures, simply type in the name. So for the sofa, you'd simply type in fabric. Here's the list. As you hover over, the website will display the size of the texture in question and whether they're seamless or not. Once you find your seamless texture, simply click on it. Inside the texture information, you can check how seamless the texture is by zooming in and out of it. Once you're happy, you can click to download from any of the available sizes. For this sofa, we're going to open the material editor and pick a new slot. As previously done, we're going to load up the V-Ray material first. We are going to start by applying the fall-off procedural map, as previously done. On this toggle, we're going to apply the color correction procedural map. Let's rename this toggle as darker. Go back to the main fall-off parameters, copy the color correction and rename it as brighter. We are going to emulate a similar effect as previously done. Let's go inside the darker color correction and apply the bitmap texture. Choose the texture named tuffyfood.jpg. Click Apply and the Show Shaded Material in the viewport. The pivot point of the sofa seems a bit off. Let's center it by clicking on the pivot button, Affect Pivot Only, and Center to Object. This will make it easier to move the object if necessary. Let's make the top viewport shaded and then check the edges option. If a surface is too dense, sometimes it makes it difficult to see the textures properly. Currently, the texture needs tiling a bit as it looks too large. Next we're going to apply the UVW map modifier from the list. By default, the UVW mapping is set to planar. For objects such as sofas, we need to use the box mapping type. When using box mapping parameters, always make sure the length, width and height values are exactly the same to prevent stretching the texture. As you can see, the texture tiling looks smaller and more realistic now. It's also good practice to look at photo references to get a good idea of texture sizes on surfaces. Next, we're going back to the material editor. Inside the darker color correction, we're going to right click and copy the texture. Go inside the brighter color correction and paste instance. It's worth noting that the textures are now instanced, but the color correction parameters are not. So in the darker color parameters, we go into the lightness settings and make it darker. Next, we go into the brighter color correction and make it brighter. In the material slot thumbnail, you can actually see the fall off between the dark and the brighter color, which is very consistent with what we normally see in real life. To make this surface even more realistic, we're going to use a mask to create patches between brighter and darker colors. To create this mask, we're going to use a V-Ray Blend procedural map. Click on the V-Ray material toggle and choose the V-Ray Blend procedural map from the list. In the Replace Material dialog, choose to keep all material as submaterial. These are some of the main parameters. The base material is what we previously had. First, we're going to copy the base material to the coat material toggle. So now we have two sets of materials. Go inside the coat material and rename it darker. Also, go inside the base material and rename it brighter. Now we have two materials with different functionalities. Next, we're going to use a grayscale or a black and white texture in a blend amount toggle to mask between the two materials. Choose the bitmap type and pick the texture named dirt iPhone 14.jpg. Now we're going to add a color correction on top of the brighter material to make the fall off even brighter. For the darker material, we're going to do the same as before and make the color correction darker. If you double click on the Go to Parent button, you'll be able to clearly see the mask dividing both materials. To quickly recap, we first use a fall off on the main texture to make it more realistic, and a blend material with a mask to add patches on top of the sofa. It might seem a bit complicated at first, but it's actually quite an easy process when you practice. Let's also rename this material as mask. That's the mask material here. The next step is to exit the selection and do a quick region render.